Let's cut right to the chase. Creative people are pretty nuts, and I know this because I'm one of them. If you're like me, you wonder, how do people get over the issues we face? That's what this show is all about. Think of each episode as a warm bath for the soul. We're all in this together, so let's do something good with the time we have left. This show is my love letter to the human condition. This, my friends, is Sentimental Illness.
Oh, yeah. All right. Look, I'm so stoked because the guy I have coming today is unbelievably cool. And we'll get there in a second, but I have a few things to say. I don't want to talk about the nature of our country right now. And yet, here I am starting at the top of the hour. For anybody who follows me online, you know I tend to put my foot in my mouth quite often. And I'm trying desperately not to do that. I also, like any human, I have feelings over the nature of things. And having served in the military, I don't say I have more at stake than others. That's not true. I do feel proud to have served our nation, very much so. I did it for a very long time, actually. 2 tours of service. But I remember a day when I was insanely patriotic. And when I got out of boot camp years ago, you have to, for the first about 6 months, you have to wear your dress uniform everywhere you go. It's just one of those ways. I don't know. I think the military likes to sort of put their young guys in place a bit. You know what I mean? Get them to own the uniform. And I wore those whites around, the ice cream man uniforms. I was in the Navy. I wore them around for those 6 months. It was required. And I remember one time going to see a movie. I think it was The Princess Bride, of all things, in the theater. So this is 1987, the fall of 1987. And for some reason, the theater played the national anthem prior to the movie. And I don't know, maybe this is something theaters used to do. Maybe my guests will remember this with me, but for whatever reason, maybe it was because it was in a Navy town. I don't know. But I remember standing up and crying because of this burned-in patriotism I had for our nation. And granted, I always felt strongly about it. My father served early Cold War era. I just always felt a pride, and I loved what our nation, what I believed, I should say maybe, stood for. I'm not saying that it does not stand for good, but we are so wound up nowadays. It's hard to see the good through the haze, through the partisanship, through the division. And so I really wanted to focus on having a different kind of guest today. And I am so grateful to have found him because, well, I met him actually a year and a half ago at one of my favorite places in the world, the Puyallup Fair, Kwabi Amoah-Forson. Now, you would probably not know him if you're not from the Pacific Northwest. He's actually quite well known here locally because he does something extraordinary. I do not want to give too much away. I would actually like the discovery process to be where you hear his story and why I brought him on board today. I have a lot on my mind, a lot of thoughts, a lot of concerns about the world, but a guy like Kwabi sort of eases the pain of the way things could be. He's doing something that we should be doing for everyone. And I find him extraordinary and capable and kind and loving, and I really don't know him. But when that kind of power, Christ's love, that power, the real Christ love, okay, not the political Christianity you see on the television, guys, not Christian nationalism, not even, this isn't about Christianity. I want to make that very clear as well. This is about doing the right thing, doing the love thing, because the love thing is how we make our mark, what we're built for. Certainly what I believe, I should say. So I wanted to have this man here. Now, let me tell you a teeny tiny story just so we can get him going. He was sitting at a little, what do they call those? Booths. He was at a booth at the Puyallup Fair. I'm a roller coaster aficionado. I'm one of those people that travels on vacation. I don't go to Hawaii. I go to an amusement park. I go to Southern California or Ohio and ride roller coasters because I'm an idiot. That's what I do. And it's true. I really do. In 2003, for example, I did a 2-week trip and I went to 11 parks and rode 53 new to me roller coasters. I'm one of those guys on the Travel Channel that, throws a banana and shows people about the weightlessness and knows the exact angle of a drop for a coaster in Japan. It's pretty silly. I was at the Puyallup Fair with my children. The first time they'd been in a number of years. First time they could actually enjoy going on the big kid rides. And we were getting some lunch. And I'm standing in line. And actually, I'm waiting for my kids. They're getting like piles of French fries. And I look off to my right. And I see this gentleman who's sitting there. And this sign that says, the Peace Bus. And I think, well, that's lovely. Now, look, I live here. And I wasn't familiar with him. I'd kind of heard through this, through the grapevine about this man, or at least about the Peace Bus. But to see him sitting there, and he had this just giant smile, this handsome guy with this giant smile. And I was just curious. And so we just started a conversation. We introduced each other. And the next thing I know, we're talking about all these good things and about hope. And about a world in dissonance and how we think, I should say, we have an answer for that. And I'm sure we'll talk about that today. I hope we talk about that today. Just an amazing guy. But I want to say this because I think it's important and potent to who he is. I know the show is very different. Typically, I host heavy metal singers or, metal guitar players or drummers or hard rock guys. And they're always European because it seems like that's where all the music comes from. This is a different show for an entirely different purpose. Not trying to build a new audience, although I imagine today will do that. I am trying to offer my place in the world a chance to hear one of the greatest voices in our lives. And I know that sounds really strange and probably makes him incredibly uncomfortable that I'm propping him up so much. I'm not placing Kwabi on a pedestal. But I am saying that there are people who do good because doing good is the right thing. Just that simple. So I'm going to bring him on, and I'm trying not to get my mic messed up too much when I do it. So let's get the music going. All right. So I got to bring him in here, and if I could just get my mouse to work. Oh, my Lord. Come on, Jesus, let's do this. There he is. Hey, how you doing, Kwabi?
What's going on, Rob? Great to see you. Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, you bet, brother. You bet. I am very excited. You have, you have a mission. We talked about that, before the show started today. I obviously brought it in, my intro, my opening. I normally do this show. I have this thing called Conversation Starters, which I guess we can plug into in a second. Normally, this show is kind of bring somebody on, we chat, we talk about some dumb things, some silly things going on in the world. We listen to some music, and then we hit the deep stuff. Okay. Today, I would like to do a little bit more of the latter, and not to bore the audience or to preach to the audience, but I just think what you're doing and your story is vital. So I want to make sure that people understand we're going to commit to you and your story today. And I encourage people to hang on and listen to the whole kit and caboodle, because this is not like watching a science experiment live on television. This is an actual conversation about truth and justice, and in a way, the American way, doing the right thing for people because it's the right thing. And I just think you're fantastic. And I know with the deepest parts of my soul that I know I have the the ability to discern. I think everybody has that, and I talk about it every show. But you do know in your heart of hearts when somebody is for real, when there's no pose. And that I know about you, that you're for real, that you're committed to this process, that you're committed to the peace bus, that you're committed to your purpose and your mission in life. And so welcome to you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Rob. That was a beautiful intro, man.
Oh,
Definitely
thanks.
puts
Well,
in context.
it's interesting that you say that, because I don't know. I feel like I blab a lot because I'm always nervous. I'm like the most nervous host in the world. and I sort of write these, I write them in advance. I interviewed Susie Quattro. Do you remember Susie Quattro?
No.
If you don't, it's cool. Susie Quattro was Leather Toscadero on Happy Days back in the 70s.
Okay.
Did you ever watch Happy Days?
Uh-huh. The Fonz.
Okay. Right. So there was Pinky Tuscadero, who was Fonzie's girlfriend, and she wore pink. And then there was her kid sister, Leather, who was a singer in sort of a glam / early punk band. And she wore leather on stage, and she was probably on the show in 77, 78. Long story short, she is a singer from the Detroit area who moved overseas, and she's still, even though you've never heard of her, one of the biggest ticket draws in the world. She sells out every show she plays. If you look her up online, it'll freak you out. And in fact, she is probably the main influencer of female rock singers, including people like, Joan Jett or the Runaways, Lita Ford. She's the original. She's the godmother of rock.
Wow.
And when I chatted with her, gosh, I want to say this was 4 years ago. She told me, she said, Rob, because she was doing radio at the time, she said, I don't ask questions. In other words, I don't sit and read a script when I'm going. But what I would do is I would write out all of this, the questions, details, lots of details, and then I would chuck them because my brain would remember what mattered.
Okay.
And I did that with you. I wrote all this stuff out, and then I've got these notes, and I'm like, I can't read them. I'd be staring at my computer the whole time.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I obviously have a memory of you because we've only met in the last 16 months. But yeah, you're very special to me, and you resonated with me, and you've remained so. So yeah, enough of my yakking,
Yeah, I like how you touched earlier, just a moment ago, about purpose. If purpose is the most important thing, finding your purpose. Someone can go. You have two different people, right? You can have someone who is starving, right? They need food, they need water, but they keep on going because they have a purpose. And then you have someone who has all the essential needs of their life, but they have no purpose. So they're lacking. So purpose is more important than food. It's more important than it's more important than a lot of things. So
yeah. Wow, that's so well put. I mean, we can almost end right there. You've given my quote of the day out already. Yeah, no, it's so true. And yeah, I will tell you, I'm going to throw myself under the bus right in front of everybody, and for your sake. I have spent a significant portion of my life being wasteful to what I've been blessed with, because I made assumptions very early in life that there was a lot of deserve in my life, that there was so much purpose that was clouded by self-servingness that I couldn't get out of my own way to actually give the world what I had been gifted with. I waited for the world to catch up to me in some arrogant style, that I deserved more, that I deserved fame, that I deserved a huge financial success because God had made me and imbued me with this set of gifts that was so unrivaled that the world would find out. I mean, I'm telling you the truth. I have to admit I was absolutely full of dog crap for a really long time.
what changed? How did the shift happen?
For a long time, and maybe not so long ago, I had to walk through extreme circumstances. For those that have not heard the story, and I'll keep it very succinct, I had always had success at whatever I chose, whether it was being in the military or it was working as an insurance agent or working as a session drummer. Whatever I was doing, I was really good at it and really successful at it, really, really fast. And so I always felt special. And I never saw it as arrogance. And I don't necessarily look back at it now and say it was arrogance. I just didn't know better. But I had never seen real difficulty, whether it was financial or, life choices. And then in 2010, I sort of upended my life, and I didn't know I was upending it. I was making a change. I wasn't enjoying my career. And I started following pathways that were pretty much purely self-serving, meaning financial. I was just looking to make money, tons of money. I just wanted money. Money, 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 money. And I got so wound up in that I lost sight of everything that mattered. I lost sight of my friends. I would burn relationships. Oh, you don't understand. You'll see. And I got to the point in 2018 where I was suicidal. Suicidal, Kwabi. I mean, standing in the shower and crying for an hour, wishing God would kill me. Anything. I don't have the balls to do it myself, but I wanted God to take me. I was just absolutely done. And the fix wasn't so much a fix, it was a journey. I spoke to a good friend of mine, his name is Max, yesterday actually about this, and he said, I don't know what it is about you, in the past, say 6 months. He said, but your life has completely altered. I see true purpose and change and confidence in your journey, where before it was all ambiguity and fear. I'm still afraid. I'm just not releasing so much of it. But I don't know. I don't think I have an answer for you, man. God did something to my heart, and he's still working on me. I mean, I'm not okay. I'm not fixed. I'm just moving forward, and I have started to see the blessings in my life versus the negatives, whatever those may be.
I was listening to a sermon by Billy Graham the other day, and he was talking about this is his take on it. He says everyone believes in God. This is what he says.
Okay.
Everyone believes in God. He says if you find someone who doesn't believe in God, they haven't been through anything yet. They haven't been through a struggle that was tough enough yet, because anytime someone goes through a very deep and arduous struggle, at some point they're going to call out to God, which is a very interesting take. I hadn't heard that before, but how you were talking and what you were explaining your story, it reminded me of that take on life. It's really interesting.
Yeah, so let me throw something back at you. I found really interesting. So one of my favorite people in the world, I love this guy, and you would love this guy. His name is Charles Cure. He's been on my show 2 times. He he sings / screams in 2 different hardcore bands on the East Coast, both New York based. He is what I would call a notorious atheist. Okay. And this is, Charles would be sitting right here where I'd be telling this story, because what I love about his story is he's so firmly entrenched in his atheism that he's not angry. He's just proud. Okay. Now, for anybody who never heard my Rockstar Superhero interview with him 2 years ago, he detailed a story of a car crash, a late night, I want to say a 2 a.m. car crash, where his vehicle hit a tree, rolled over, and he was in the middle of nowhere. He had no hope of being seen or found or saved or, rescued. He was going to die upside down, stuck against a tree on a lonely country road in upstate New York.
Wow.
And I said, well, what about God? I said, did you find yourself screaming out to God at your potential last moments? Because, you hear about this. Look, I've seen people die. I'm not proud of that. I've seen a few people die, but they were also hospitalized. They weren't stuck upside down in a car leaking gas, And you always hear the whole, everybody's an atheist until they're upside down in the car, right? And then they're like,
Right.
please, Lord, save me.
Right.
Charles said, and it was funny actually how he said it. He said, Rob, I was so proud of myself because I didn't call out to God. And I say that because of what you had just mentioned
Right.
with Billy Graham. At the same token, there was a part of me that was kind of saddened by Charles saying that. But as I probed deeper, and I encourage anybody to go back and listen. Look, I'm the worst host in the world. I gab, I go off on tangents, I say way too often. But our conversation was wonderful because it poked and prodded at the idea of, well, yeah, but what if? What if, Charles? What if there's a creator? What if you are loved? What if God sent somebody when you should have died upside down next to a tree, but at 2 a.m. in the middle of nowhere, 15 miles from a town, some random guy drove by and happened to see you off of the road and came and helped you out? Would that be a God thing? And what's interesting is even though his answer was no, that would be a human being driving by. And I can see the logic in that because, look, if you don't believe in God, you're not going to think God sent you somebody. I mean, if you truly don't believe. But this guy, came and helped him and took him off. But what it did is it opened a conversation between two people who became friends, and that we are able to, regardless of the chasm of differences in our stance on faith or the existence of a creator, develop something that's real and profound. I mean, we're very close.
Yeah.
And here's how I see it. And Charles, if you're watching, this is for you, buddy. You're going to come to know him. You are. You're going to come to know him. And not because of me, but because there's a trigger point in having that conversation that you can't deny. It's something spiritual that gets inside of you. And if you want to call it an infection or whatever, but the belligerent idea of a God not existing has been softened now. And I love that. And to me, Kwabi, that's my purpose. This show, I talk to metal guys. I love heavy metal. I love hardcore music. I do. The older I get, the more ferocious I want it. I like I love that stuff now. And I hated it 10 years ago. I hated it. But all of a sudden, I'm digging it. And I feel like, okay, my purpose is to talk to these people because I'm fascinated by the music, but to also just be present as a friend and as a listener and to hear their stories, and that people, even if they don't believe, and I'm not saying I don't care, but even if they don't believe, they are experiencing something, without patting myself on the back, they are experiencing something good. And I know it's Christ-like, but they're recognizing, that somebody gives a shit about them, regardless of the fact that they may not agree. And that's how I feel about Charles. And to me, there's always hope because of that little nudge.
Yeah, Christ is in you. He lives in us. So
Yeah.
when you have those conversations, that they're witnessing, the God within us. So that's so cool, man.
Yeah. And if I could say one thing before we move forward is, I'm sorry I'm talking a lot, but I want people to understand this. I am the most hypocritical human. People always say like, oh, Christians are such hypocrites. Well, yes. Nothing has happened to us and everything has happened to us. We know that Christ has come to us, come in us, whatever you want to call it, and changed us. But we're still flesh. We still live in this world. We're still broken. Guys like me, sorry, I'm going to raise my hand. I swear like a sailor. I have to admit that. Anybody who watches this show, I do question faith at times. I do question my purpose, what's going on. But moments like this, I'm reminded that, oh, that's right. Just being present, being an ear is enough. I mean, I have no idea what God has for me. I don't. I have no clue. But I'm standing in a vocal booth that I received as a gift, Kwabi. I received this 2 weeks ago as a gift.
What?
Yes. 2 weeks ago. I've wanted something like this. These are crazy expensive, 5-figure expensive. And I was gifted this. That's not an accident. People can be like, oh, I'm telling you, it's not an accident. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. So I just keep moving forward, man. Now I do my interviews in here, but I'm also, I'm auditioning for companies. I want to do voiceover. I'd love to do cartoon work, whatever. But I'm in here moving forward, and it was a gift. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, I want to lie to everybody and tell them I bought it, but come on, I can't afford this. It's insane. It's insane. What am I, Will Arnett? I'm going to do a Chevy commercial next. You know what I mean? All right. Enough of that. Let's get to the boogie here.
And now, conversation starters.
Okay, so I know we can talk because we're friends. We're not just friendly, we're friends. But I do want to say something. 37 years ago today, I joined the Navy.
Wow.
Yeah. And I know that's a self-serving thing, a statement. It's not a question. It's not something about you. But I do want to say this. I was so excited. I don't know why I wanted to do this, but I did it. And I'm so grateful for the time I was in the service. Even though I would tell you that of the 7 years I did serve 7, that I really didn't like most of it. I mean, I really didn't like it. But I met so many amazing people, and I was formed in such a way that I'm so grateful for it. So I just wanted to put that out there. But I'm curious, did you do any time in the service? I mean, I know you're serving now, but it's a different kind of service.
No, I haven't. I didn't. I had thought about it. My best friend of all times, his name's Austin Duncan, and he was in the Air Force, and he has suggested maybe I go into the armed forces, with 2 best friends signing up, but I didn't. But his ability to go to Europe and be stationed in the Netherlands is what brought me to promoting peace all throughout Europe. So him joining helped me a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah, it was a wild experience. I mean, if you want to know what it's like, go onto YouTube and watch one of those Navy boot camp videos. And I mean, it's still exactly like it shows. And in fact, I got a little bit of what do they call that? PTSD, excuse me. Watching them, I remembered just the torture of the first few days of boot camp and being confused and getting sick, and you know what I mean. I got crabs in boot camp because you're using other people's beds. They just roll people out of these racks, and I remember this was 87, so this was a time when. This is around the Just Say No era, but this was also an era where if you were gay, you were kicked out after you went to jail, by the way. And I remember going to the corpsman because I had something going on and I didn't know what was going on. And the first question they asked me if I was gay. Because there would be no way I had crabs in boot camp unless I was gay, which is very strange. And I remember them asking me 3 or 4 times, just accusing me. Maybe it was my sweet face, I don't know. but the point is it was really strange, and then they gave me medication for it. And then the first day, because it's the military, they give you a little glass bottle with this shampoo that you're supposed to use. And I don't think I've ever told this story. And so everybody's in their rack because I get back to the barracks at 11:30 at night, and all the guys are in bed already. So now I've actually, the first time in 3 weeks, I've been able to shower on my own and to take my time, no less. And I've got this little glass bottle of shampoo, and I'm washing myself, and I know it's making things better. And I immediately dropped the bottle. So I got one run of shampoo, and then sure enough, about 4 months later, I got a regrowth. So yeah, I know. There's no point to the story outside of I've had crabs and they suck.
Rob, what would you say is the number one thing you learned from your experience in the Navy?
Overcoming. And I know that's a very sort of open-ended, generalized statement / word. For me, the hardest part was obviously doing things you did not want to do and having to do them anyway, and you would be punished if you didn't, and severely punished. I mean, even jailed, because when you're in the military, your orders are your orders, no matter what. Whether you like them or not, no matter what, that's what you do. In the first 2.5 years, I was on submarines. And that's a wild experience because you're dealing with so many new variables. You've got everything from literally the sub, the interior of the sub hitting your head on millions of things, trying to figure things out, trying to deal with 120 different personalities, going out to sea, working 18-hour days for 2 years, 18-hour days, Kwabi, 18-hour days. Most people don't realize how much you work, but they call it, it's like 12 on, 6 off, 12 on, 6 off, 12 on, 6 off.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. And so you lose time. And I think they do that because when you're out to sea and you're underwater and you have no daylight and, your only light is the overhead fluorescence, you do get a little stir crazy. And so having that time switch where, you get a 6-hour rest, if you will, you lose track of days because you're on these 18-hour rotations. And so the first 2 or 3 days is awful. It's very confusing. And then within a week, you literally don't care. You just get up, you do your shift. On your 6 hours off, you actually probably sit down and watch a movie and eat some food, and then you do another 12-hour shift. You're not thinking about sleep because you get so desensitized. It's like being in the show The Deadliest Catch. You're working all the time. You get used to it, which is kind of cool. So for me, it was just the ability to overcome. And nowadays, man, you could break my leg and I'm going to go to work.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So I'm kind of hardcore that way.
Gotcha,
Probably a hard dad too. But I mean, well, I don't know how to shut it off. They definitely retrain your brain, right? I mean, that's how they make soldiers. We weren't in the Navy. You're not taught to kill. It's not one of the things that the Navy does. But you do learn how to operate in extreme circumstances for a very long time. It's a tough gig.
I love the aspect of discipline. Doing the things you don't want to do and doing them over and over again builds sort of like a mental callus.
Yeah.
So that you can, I think about my pilot training. So I've been in pilot training for the last, 2.5 years.
Fantastic.
And, with aviation, it's different than driving the car in the sense that, well, I'm sure this would probably be the same if you're driving a car. If you were to stop driving your car for maybe a few months and you get back into driving, it's going to be a little funny. And with aviation, it's like, you fly a plane maybe 2 times a week for 4 weeks, and then you take a few weeks off. You have to relearn things that you already had learned before. And so it's with the training, it's like, okay, I got to get back in there. I got to build the callus again because it's a mission I'm on in order to do A, B, or C, So discipline is a huge part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. May I ask a question about that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, okay. So I am deeply fascinated with it as well, learning how to fly a plane. I'm also fascinated with the idea of being not a professional, but a recreational skydiver to the point that I would do tons of jumps. I've done one jump, and it was tandem, of course, because it's, typically it's either tandem or the 8-hour training thing, and I didn't want to do that. My problem in life, and I hold my hand up highly, is I am a bit ADD. Not terribly, but I am the guy who I'm just afraid I'm going to forget something. I'm going to be so excited about flying the plane that I'm going to forget something on a checklist. And I know the checklist is the checklist, meaning you're reading it and you're saying, flaps or whatever, whatever the
Hmm.
terminology is. You're doing those things. You're literally checking them off to
Yeah.
ensure that everything is there. And yet, if I were flying in for a landing, and I know I've heard that takeoffs are actually more dangerous. I don't know if that's true. Um, but if I'm flying in for a landing, I just feel like I'm going to be so hyper focused on bringing it in that I'm going to forget something on the list that says, "Oh, by the way, flaps up," or whatever, to provide braking or whatever, that I'm going to make some critical error because I'm just having a fun, I'm having fun, or I'm just overwhelmed by the experience. And I'm curious if you have found yourself going like, "Oh my God," like, you know what I mean? At the last minute, remembering you have to do something because you were enjoying it so much.
No, I think ADHD would probably be to your benefit when you're trying to land an
Interesting.
airplane. There's so many things you have to be looking at. Once you're looking at your airspeed indicator, making sure you're coming down at 60 knots, then
Yeah,
you're looking at your RPM, making sure that the throttle's is out, and then
right.
you're looking at your carb heat, making sure that's on. Your ADHD would probably be for your benefit, man, because you have to check everything. It I don't think it's necessarily even a sensory overload either. You do it so many times, it
Yeah.
becomes sort of, second nature. And then if you're able to, see one thing and then pan over and then check the next thing, I think, when it comes to ADHD, I feel like being having that tunnel vision is
Yeah.
just it wouldn't happen. I don't think it'd happen, man. I really don't
Okay.
think.
Okay. Well, I'll tell my wife.
Yeah.
Well, because I mountain well, okay, I used to mountain bike. I used to ride every day, like 3 hours a day. Crazy. And I would like to get back into it. But all that said, motorcycles have always interested me.
Okay.
But the reason I don't buy a motorcycle, and probably never will, is I know that no matter how much mountain biking I do, inevitably I crash. I mean, name one, any mountain biker trust me, man, they crash. They crash constantly, in fact.
Why is
Even
that?
I don't know. I think it might be pushing the limits, or just the fact that, I mean, come on, man. When you were a kid and you rode your bike around on the streets, on the sidewalks, you didn't really have anything in the way, but every once in a while you'd wipe out. I mean, it's just something about biking. Biking, you crash. And when you have a motorcycle, now it weighs 500, 600, 900 pounds, or you're going 40 miles an hour, or a car pulls out in front of you on purpose even. You know what I mean? It just feels like that's just death waiting, you know? Like, I just can't bring
Yeah.
myself to do it. And I know I would love it if I could get out on those country roads, but yeah, just gosh, it terrifies me, man.
Yeah, it's the person variable to me. It's the other cars in the road, it's the other motorcycles, other vehicles, and there's so many out there. In aviation, there's not too much traffic unless you're going into, class B airspace.
Hmm.
Should be
What's
pretty
that?
good.
What's
Uh,
Class B?
Class Bravo airspace is like SeaTac or San Francisco
Oh,
or like New
okay.
York or LA. It's like big airspace. You have to actually have clearance in order to get into that airspace, or else you
Right.
can't fly in there. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I guess that's the other part of flying that probably sounds very unromantic, this idea that if you're, say, flying across, I don't know, over the Rocky Mountains, for example,
Mhm.
I would think that for the most part, there are moments when you're not in any sort of, like you mentioned, these Class B airspaces where you can just admire what you're flying over, that you can just look at the scenery or take photos or whatever you choose to do. But it seems to me that you're constantly crossing over into some airspace somewhere, that you're always basically on the radio talking to somebody. And I don't know, that sounds so distracting and honestly overwhelming to me. That sounds like it's the worst part.
No, you're not on the radio.
Okay. Okay.
Often, unless you're going in for a landing, or you're going into an airspace where you have to contact the tower. Most
Okay.
of it, unless you're doing flight following, if you have someone who you've reached out to at a nearby airport and you're like, "Hey, I'm coming to your airport later on today. I'd like to do flight following," and then they'll check up with you as you're going towards the airport. But if you're not doing that, like I fly about once a week. I'm out. I'm
Huh.
just out in the sky. just doing whatever, you know.
Right on. Right on. Right
Yeah.
on. Okay, well, look, we're going to get to your story here. But there's something I haven't done for a few weeks that I would like to do today.
Okay.
Is I try once a week to react. I'm trying not to be one of those kids. But I try to bring in a new song, something I've heard. So I'm deeply connected on the PR side, and I'm very fortunate. I mean, it's kind of mind-numbing. I probably get 200 emails a day from PR companies pushing an artist, and I hear a lot of music, which is great if you're a musician like myself, or a listener in general, like to collect, MP3s. That said, this week I've received a lot of stuff, but none of it's really caught my attention. I should say none. Sorry, PR people. Very little has captured my attention. So I go onto YouTube and I look around on the channels that seem to inspire me. And I found a video, which is fairly innocuous, but I listened to this band. So this band is called Izzy and Chris. And if you look them up on YouTube, they have very few followers. If you look them up on Instagram, they're a little bit more, but they're one of those new things. They are very curious to me, and they play a style of music that I call driving music. It's music I want to listen to in the car. Now, as any listener of mine knows, I am always about the rhythm and the tones and maybe the aggression. I like, again, hard rock and heavy metal. That said, I never listen to lyrics. Never. I mean, never. To the point that when I was a little kid, I bought Nick Gilder's Hot Child in the City back in 1978, and I was playing that 45 record on my record player at home, and I'm just listening to it and loving it. My mom comes in, storms in, yells at me, and tells me to take that record off because it's about a child prostitute. And I'm telling you, I had no idea. Come on, Hot Child in the City, young and wild and looking pretty. I mean, it's about like a child prostitute. And, and I'm like, Mom, listen to the piano. Dun, 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 dun. I just loved the rhythm and the tones, right? So yesterday when I heard this song, this Izzy and Chris song, it's called Quit the Show, Never, in parentheses. And I thought, that sounds like a song from a movie, like somebody trying too hard, at least the title. But then I listened to it now, so I'm not really reacting here, but I do want to play it for you. And I'd like to play it from audience because I think it's just lovely. There's nothing aggressive about it. It's just a beautiful song with a beautiful story. So I encourage people to check it out, and I wanted you to hear about it. And yeah, here it is. Let's do this.
And now it's time for self-diagnosis.
All right, Kwabi. You're here because you're my friend, but you are an amazing influencer, somebody that I do look up to, somebody when I met, I knew instantly that you had a real voice and real power and real vision and real purpose. And I know I said that at the top of the hour, but boy, do I mean it. But I want to know where that comes from. And I know we talked a little bit about the faith thing, but I would like to know how you were formed. The traditional thing. Can you take us back a few years and tell me how you grew up, where you grew up, and maybe how you believe you ended up where you are?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in University Place, Washington. It's a suburb area of the Tacoma area, and it's its own city, but I don't really classify it as its own place. It's basically like
Sure.
Tacoma suburbs.
Sure.
And my mom was an older parent. My mom and dad were older parents. So my mom had me when she was 41. My mom was born in 1949.
Wow.
That being the case, we skipped a generation. So my parents should have been my grandparents. A lot of the music, a lot of the influences were all coming from the 50s and 60s. So my mom was telling me and my brother about, I grew up to Sam Cooke and
Right on.
music like, the Carpenters, things like that instead of,
Good stuff.
the stuff from the 90s, in the 2000s. And the message was always clear. I don't know if this is something unique to the 50s and 60s, but it was like, you can literally do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Perseverance is key. Whatever barriers are in your place, work to knock them down. It may take some time, but with perseverance, anything is possible. So this was wired in my brain at an early age. Now, how I was going to utilize this message in what direction, I didn't know. So I tried a ton of different things. At first, I wanted to become a martial artist. So in 7th grade, I got into Taekwondo. I started lifting weights. I wanted to be just like Bruce Lee. So I became immersed in that culture, left that behind, and then I got into rugby. So this is something I really got into in my late high school days, college days, just really getting into rugby, thinking I wanted to be a professional rugby player.
Right.
And then I did a bunch of different bodybuilding, always something physical and always something that you could work on and see your progress. Um, when I went off to college, I went to Western Washington University for a little bit there, and I got
Bellingham.
deep into reggae music. And so I thought I was going to be a reggae musician. And
Wow.
this is sort of the initial shift, right? So as you probably know, reggae music's all about upliftment. It's all about
Mhm.
positivity, people coming together, peace, love, this sort of ideals. And having that and having it be coupled with this idea of perseverance, what I got from my parents, I started getting into the essence of what does peace really look like in the world, right? That's when the ideas of researching came to place, was in my first couple of years at Western. And then I came back home to Tacoma after a couple of years at Western, went to school out here at the Evergreen State College Tacoma campus.
Hmm.
And then grad school is when my initial start of being a humanitarian, that's when that started.
Wow. 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 Okay. So, I mean, you're pursuing a wildly different life than your peers, I imagine, even at that time. I mean, nowadays I can look at you and just say, look, here's this guy whose focus is this peace bus. This is his life. This is who he is. This is his identity. But did you feel like an outsider at the time? Did you feel like you were the weird kid who had some bigger, higher purpose, some draw, some conviction that you weren't recognizing in others?
No, not at first. I at first, to be honest, I felt pretty lost. This is before I discovered this purpose. I was in
Mm-hmm.
grad school. I was in, grad school for business, doing my thing. I thought I was, achieving and going down the route that I wanted to go down, but I was still feeling unfulfilled. I'm doing all this work, getting my grades, but I'm feeling empty. And so I did something that a lot of people don't do in our current day and age, and I feel like a lot of young people don't do, and that's reaching out in the community for guidance. So I reached out to one of my old academic advisors. His name was Peter Bacho, and I called him up and I was like, Dr. Bacho, I'm struggling. I don't know what I'm doing in school. Can you help me out? He was like,
Hmm.
Kwabi, come down to my office. We'll talk about it. Dr. Bacho is this old Filipino guy. He's in his mid 90s, I believe now.
Okay.
And he actually he died, and they revived him, which is nuts. So
Okay, because I was like, you just said he's in his mid-90s and he died, and I was like, those do not compute to me.
right,
But okay.
right. Yeah, they brought him back.
Huh?
And so I met with Dr. Bacho, and as I'm telling him my concerns, my worries, how I'm dismayed, he tells me to shut up. He's like, shut up, you're complaining too much. You need to
Wow.
stop asking yourself, what do you want to be? And start asking yourself, who do you want to be? And this
Hmm.
question is something that really transcended my life and put me into an arena where I was being challenged to be myself, right?
Hmm.
I thought out of anything in the entire world, the thing that I love the absolute most is seeing different people from different walks of life, races, colors, and creeds coming together for something positive. And to me, that's peace. And so when I initially started this campaign and working for peace, I didn't tell my friends about it because I didn't want that feeling of being ostracized. I knew they'd be like, "What are you doing? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
What are you doing?"
Yeah.
So I didn't
Yeah.
tell anyone. And I started going to the park, and I had this table, and I had posters. One said "Love, Peace, and Justice for All," The other one said war is not the answer to no to violence. I started talking to random strangers about peace and asking them, what does peace mean to you? And after a while, Saturday mornings, it became this thing. There's this kid at the park and he'll talk to you about peace. And it may have been a couple of months before I told my friends what I was doing.
Wow. Okay, so yeah, the pursuit of this direction is so mind-blowing to me. Not for what you might think, but because to me it seems like that any young man in the world, like their first order of business is to find a job that makes them a good living, right? That they're pursuing capitalism, that they're pursuing influence through capitalism. That certainly as Americans, we're sort of taught that that's the direction we should go. And in fact, we're taught through social media that that's what the ladies want. They want the guy who's earning the big bucks, so she can live the big life. And I find it fascinating that you kept yourself reserved, focused, on point, and quiet. You didn't tell others. When you think back about not telling others, was it fear, embarrassment, or that you just wanted to break through on your own?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. Like I wanted to break through on my own. I wanted to be focused and understanding what it meant. It was still in its infancy. And I know that, people who are closest to you have a big deal of sway, right? You
Right.
tell your parents something, they're going to tell you what they feel naturally, and that may shift you left or right. And my friends were the same way. I was very close with my friends at the time, and I knew they'd probably want to get involved and try to dictate how I should go. And I was like, I knew that I needed time to myself to mold this in the direction in which God was telling me to do it, not man. What is God telling? How am I supposed to go about navigating this space? And so it was an intimate time, and to be fair, it still is an intimate time.
Right.
And I wouldn't even say that you brought up the ideals of capitalism. I don't think I'm not an
Of
anti-capitalist,
course.
you
Yeah.
know. I do understand. Well, this I guess is going on a different tangent. I
That's
don't
fine.
know of it. Cool. I don't know, and if anyone's listening to this, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I don't know of an economic system in modern day that has taken the most amount of people out of poverty than the capitalist system. I also understand that capitalism has its evils. It has, in order for it to exist, exploitation has to happen. But
Right.
I think that creating a society where people have at least their essential needs met, and we create certain systems that allow people to pursue their potentiality, we can, whoever has the next idea that's better than capitalism, will be able to utilize their skills to create it. And then we're pushing forward as far as human progress is concerned.
Yeah. I want to throw something at you that I heard yesterday, and I think it goes very much along with your message, if I may. There's a well-known actor who won the Oscar last year, Ke Huy Quan, who won for Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Have you seen that movie yet?
Yes, I have seen it.
Okay, so you know of the performance, and you certainly know of the person. And if you know his story, of course, he was a child actor who eventually stopped acting because he couldn't get roles and went out into the real world and became a normal person, and then felt the call of acting and came back in the latter part of his life and then won the Oscar. And in his conversation with Dax Shepard that I listened to yesterday, he talked about this idea of support. And the way he spoke of it was wildly different than I'd ever heard. And it's basically this, that he gives all of his success not to God, not to his own efforts, but to the people that surrounded him, who encouraged him and lifted him up despite his personal circumstances, meaning like, his economic base or his I hate the term race, his culture, whatever you want to call it, that he was supported always. and that he feels like he has to give, if he's going to give credit to anything, it's all the people in his life, his parents, his wife, his mentors, who always, 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 100% of the time supported his vision, his craft, and his destination. And he's lived an extraordinary life and experienced amazing things and been elevated by people who saw the better parts of him. And nowadays, especially in politics, and you see this all the time online, is the first thing a capitalist says is, oh, socialism's bad, or you want to give something to somebody else, and that's only going to harm this guy over here, or it's going to harm the guy you're giving it to because he didn't earn it. There's this negative connotation to gifting somebody your time or love or support or elevation. And you're proving that that's not true. Ke Kwan's story proves it's not true. Where do you think the disconnect is? Why are we like this?
Yeah, I would say that I think it comes in this sense of lack of purpose. Because if you are understanding of who you are and your direction of your life, you're going to be willing to help other people because you're centered. You know,
Wow.
um,
Great.
I don't even know how to go further than that. I think that knowing yourself gets you in a realm where you're able to gift others and have that compassion. But when there's turmoil within of and ambiguity about where you're headed, you're going to get in this scarcity mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I have is for me. I need it. I don't. I can't have the means towards giving out because I'm depleted, right?
Right. Right.
And that has nothing to do with economics. It has nothing to do with how much money you make. It has to do with you knowing yourself, but I would say this as well, because knowing yourself is a continuous effort. It's not like one day you're like, I know myself and I'm done, right?
Right on.
So
Right on.
it's choosing to go down that path of self-discovery and being grounded in that, which allows people in order to help other people to the extent that it needs to be for the world, honestly, to be more peaceful.
Right. Okay, so it seems to me in our culture that nostalgia, right or wrong, looking back, saying, oh, I remember a time when America was a better place, a safer place, or that maybe I hadn't necessarily, I'm not talking about myself here, but just being hypothetical, that I hadn't grown up enough to understand what the world was really about. And I missed those days when I was clueless to reality, right? There's all these ways we can look back and say, the world was a better place back then. In my day, before Elvis Presley came and shook his hips. Yeah, you had World War II, dude. Yeah. Great, good memories. Oh, 20 years before that, World War I. 20 years before that, you know what I mean? There's always something going on. How do you continue to look forward and not to rest on your laurels or to seek something that you believe is a better time?
This is the best time in human history right now. As hard as that is to believe, we are living in the best time in human history. For someone
What
like
makes you
myself,
say that? Yeah, I want to know.
okay,
What makes you say
there's
that?
a lot of different points. One, someone like myself, it's the safest time for me to be alive, right?
Sure, I get that.
Looking at it medically, the medical anomalies that we've discovered and have invented and as far as now, it's the best time to be
Right.
alive. The inventions we have, the convenience that we have, the communicative nature of human beings that we have. We're able to call someone on a phone. We have literally knowledge, infinite knowledge in our hand, right?
Right on. True. So true.
We think about this. I'll make this point. And this sort of coincides with human progress. In the early 1900s, kids weren't required to go to school. So if you had the money, you send them to school. If you didn't have the money, they didn't go to school, right?
Mm-hmm.
There might have been like a little, classroom for elementary education, but that was as far as it went. In America, there was an overall consensus that it made sense that every child should go to school, should be required to go to school, and this was for the benefit of all people. Great, right?
Hmm.
And as we look at the wave of human progress, that's just one major proponent of us moving forward. Now we're at the next stage where I would say that it makes sense that every child should have quality education. And these are all inclusive institutions that are building us up and moving us forward. And so I would rather live in a world where at least, medically we're more adept, educationally we're more adept. So yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. I think the main part of your story really isn't what you've said, it's what you haven't said, which is it doesn't seem to me that you were raised in a fear-based environment.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd say so. Fear-based environment. Yeah.
Well, it's really common, man. I mean, look, I love my parents, and I'm not saying they introduced fear. That's not it. But there was always a concern with my dad because of his constant desire to sort of prove himself, how he was raised. He was raised in an environment that was very, very tough. He was I don't want to say the only, but his father married very young. We're talking like 16, and had 3 children very young. And one of them had died by the time he was 20. And so my dad grew up in a wild and very dissonant household. And then he was when his father remarried. Now he's the dark horse because he's the luggage. He's the one coming along for the ride. And they had 4 more children. And this isn't, look, I can't explain his experience because I wasn't there. I can only go off of what he said. But he always felt like an outsider and really despised that. And even in his last days, I interviewed him on his deathbed. I've never made it public. I've never played it for my mom. I've actually never talked about it until right now. But I asked him, I said, do you forgive your parents? And he said, no. And I'm not saying he couldn't let it go. He didn't want to. He just felt so alienated from life. And so he spent his entire life pleasing people that weren't there.
Mm.
And that fear, whatever you want to call it, that lack of a confident life moving forward. It made him a great dad. He was a great dad. And I know he tried his best to be a great husband. I know he tried. That's the thing. My dad was a super hard worker. He would drive 2 hours a day just to go to work. 2 hours, one way. I experienced it. He would come home like at 9 o'clock. We'd eat dinner at 9. And he did it all the time. He didn't stay in town. He'd drive 2 hours. He would leave at 6 in the morning, get there by 8, come back home, be home by 9. Just insane. So the hard work was there. The ethics and the morals were there. The drive was there, but there was that broken soul, and he sought fulfillment his entire life, and he couldn't get it from his faith, so he was always pursuing it in his career, and some of that did rub off on me, and I don't see that in you. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think that there may be some similarities between your father and my father. My dad worked a lot, was sort of disconnected from our family.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of a loner in that sense. He didn't have too many friends that I saw, at least. Very professional. He was a doctor. Well, had a doctorate in engineering. He was an engineer.
Sure.
Was very, very the tip top as far as his field. I would say that I learned the sense of professionalism from him and discipline. But yeah, he was more of like a stoic figure than someone I could go and talk to about issues or problems going on with myself. Um, I believe that at an early age, I was very purposeful about who I let in and surrounded myself with,
Hmm.
right? So I chose to surround myself with people who were optimists. If I was around someone who was too much of a pessimist, it would become difficult, too much energy to convince somebody when I know what I'm trying to do, or at least the path that I want to go down. and it became too conflicting. And it would come to a point where I'm like, hey man, this isn't gonna work. And that's happened several times in my life, where I have a group of friends, we get close, and for what reason or the other, it's just like, hey, like the road that I'm going down is very different from yours,
Yeah.
and it's just not gonna work. Um, but to answer your question, I don't know. I think there came a point where I believe it's because of the mission. The mission's so important. It's so
Yeah.
important that I really can't afford to be boggled down by, I don't know, by issues that I really can't control.
Right, right. But you see it that way. See, that's what I'm saying. You see it that way automatically. You didn't have to be trained into that mindset. And that, I think, is what separates you. And I mean in a good way, that keeps you from losing track of your destination, right? Because you're not necessarily seeking fulfillment in others or through other behaviors. You just know what you know, and you're moving forward because you understand the gift, the purpose, the drive, the direction of it.
Yeah, it's all God, man.
Yeah. So without getting too ferociously religious here, I'm not afraid of it, of course. I always know that people struggle with it because they don't necessarily understand it. But I think it's really important that we actually talk about that today. So for those of you watching, please watch this part. I think it's really important for you to understand why people of faith feel the way they feel. Faith to me, and I mean, I'm talking faith, and I'm saying deep-hearted faith. Like I have faith that God loves me, that he's made me, that he's imbued me with this series of gifts, and I recognize in the deepest parts of my soul his desire for me to use those strengths and to put them into the world in a way that serves others. That's a positive thing. That is not self-serving. That is one, you're dying to yourself every day. You're getting up and you're serving others. And that's the exact antithesis. That's the opposite of everything we're taught, especially in America, where it's all about how much money can I make? How much influence can I have? Where's the big house? Where's the cool car? Where's the hot wife? How do you manage your own desires, your own flesh in this world?
Whew, Rob. That's a
Going deep,
massive
baby.
question.
I
That's a
know.
shoot.
But it's real, and it's something I see you doing. Look, I don't know. I'm not elevating you up on a pedestal. I'm really not.
Right.
I just see you doing something I wish, I know that sounds weird because I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, but there's a wish in me that I felt better about the direction of what I'm doing. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I see what you're doing. I'm like, oh, there's a guy who's just confident and satisfied. And, he's just probably the happiest guy in the world. Like you go to church and you see a certain person at the church and you're like, oh, that couple, man, they're good. Like if I could just have a marriage like that, life would be great.
Mhm.
Right. And then they go home and beat each other,
Right.
I mean, we're all struggling. And I guess this is what I wanted to say is that for people who don't believe, who either are true hardcore like atheists, like you're an idiot if you believe in anything, or just don't understand why anybody could feel compelled by that purpose, then I can't really help you. But let me tell you that when your heart knows, it doesn't matter. That's what faith is I don't need proof.
Yeah.
I don't want to say the line. It's the verse from the Bible that says, Christ is a conundrum to the Jews and folly to the Gentiles. They all think we're nuts, and I completely understand, but I can't help it. He touched me and changed me. Now, did he change I can still get up and go look at porn and go do drugs and steal from my neighbor and wish I could have sex with my neighbor's wife, all the things that we're told we're not supposed to do. And I could do all those things, but it wouldn't be me pursuing the best me. Now, I've failed at times. I'm not going to talk about what things I failed at necessarily today unless we want to go down that road. But life continues to be a struggle. God didn't change my humanity. My humanity still exists, but Christ in me is the counterpoint, that the spirit, my spirit, not my body, but my spirit is in communication all the time with the Holy Spirit, with the Lord.
Yeah.
Saying, Rob, and not as a school, like a nun in a Catholic school, but as a dad who loves me. How I'm sorry for rambling, but
no.
Where's your faith? Where does your faith touch your humanity? How does that work for you?
Yeah. Well, we all have our vices. We all have our struggles. Human beings, that's what we are. And so that comes along with the territory. When it comes to my faith, I try to have my ear up with I probably should have it more in tune with God with the small decisions that I make, but it's often the large ones where I'm like, hey, God, is this for me? If it's something that's obviously not good for me, I'll try my best to stay away from it. I'll try my best. Sometimes I succumb to it, but most of the time I'm like, I know that this decision is going to bring about chaos. And it's less of like, this is going to bring chaos for me. It's more like, hey, I'm on a mission.
Right.
There's a chance that if I indulge myself in this problem or in this thing that's going to bring chaos, a kid doesn't get fed.
Yeah. It destroys the mission.
Right. So it's like, all right, like it's a kind of a heavy load sometimes. It's like, dang, like God's asked me to do this work. All right. So we're doing it. And because of that, there's certain things that I just can't expose myself to or even play around with. In my early 20s, I did a lot of that stuff. So maybe I got it out.
Yeah.
And now that I'm, getting older, and understanding the seriousness of this path that I'm on, I believe that as well as, Christ allows me to sort of walk this thin line. And I say this now. Oh, you got something?
No, that's perfect. The thin line thing is totally what I want to talk about. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah. And I say this now knowing that the future's coming. I don't know what's for me in the future. I will most likely slip up somehow. But as of right now, when I think of all the blessings that have happened in my life that make no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
And they happen. So in respect to God, for him being who he is, as well as the love that he's given me, I'm going to try my best to do right. I'm going to try my best to abide by him as much as I possibly can,
Yeah. I talk about this a lot, but I do want to throw this out there one more time because you and I have never talked about this. Pastor of my church. So I normally work on Sundays, so I almost never go to church. And honestly, in a lot of ways, I don't enjoy church. Just happy to throw it out there. It's just never really been something I enjoyed. I went to church all my life. But occasionally, you have those like, wow, I'm so glad I was here. And I will say this, that the times I've never wanted to go and that I do go, I'm like, oh, wow, I'm glad I went because I experienced something today, or I met somebody that needed to, that I needed to hear from, or that needed to hear from me. So I'm grateful for those things. But this pastor, he and I have become really good friends, and we're really what I would call hangout music friends. Because again, I work on Sundays. I typically don't go to church. But we do hang out. We were hanging out yesterday. We're actually hanging out in this vocal booth, just chatting for like an hour, just talking about stuff, listening to music together, and so much fun. And he goes to a lot of concerts with me, specifically heavy metal concerts. And I love that. I love that this guy, this sort of white, nerdy, thin, tall, goofy guy, he's at a Gojira concert, and they're like, hey, motherfuckers, you know what I mean? And he's like, yeah, you know what I mean? Because he is not pious. He loves the Lord. but he's not like, oh man, that guy said a bad word. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I don't know where I'm going with this. I don't know where I'm going with this. I just know that I love that.
Yeah.
I love the idea of being just present and enjoying something and letting people see that I am loving this moment. And a couple years ago, I was going through probably the worst stages of my depression, and he had said, Rob, your purpose is people. It's your identity is not you as a drummer, or at my time, a failed drummer, a person who had been in the industry but had never, gotten famous or made millions of dollars. Because I was really, really whining about that, to be clear, whining all the time. Well, how come it didn't happen to me? Why didn't it work out? I practiced 10 hours a day. I never got anywhere. Why? You know what I mean? God sucks, It's like, Rob, man, your purpose is people. It's how you connect with others, which has led me to here, Kwabi. And then talking about gifts, this booth, it's a gift. I mean, it's an actual physical, tangible gift that costs a ton of money that I got for free. So I cannot say that God isn't for me. But I do want to say that God doesn't sit on my shoulder and say, Rob, do that thing, or, you know what I mean? Christ is love, but he's also holiness. And the part that I want to say out loud that I never say out loud is we tend to forget that. We always talk about the hippie version of Jesus, but we don't talk about the righteous version of Jesus, who is holy and who has expectations on us and for us, but in the same token, because of grace, allows us to be 100% broken and failed human. And that's the beauty of the Christian walk to me. Being able to be broken and flawed and continuously so, and to still remain in his presence because of Christ's death. That's freaking badass.
Yeah. 100%. That's a mic drop, Rob.
Yeah. I know all my metal people are like, what the hell, dude? Like, why are you talking about this? This is boring. Come on, man. All of you know, I talk about it all the time. All of you know I'm a believer. I just don't preach. And I'm not trying to preach now. I'm just saying my world was upside down. It was chaos. Complete chaos. And I still fail every day. I'm an awful father. I want to be a better father, but then there's a part of me that's just stuck in habit. I want what I want. And it's so hard to overcome that. And so when I see a guy like you, man, I'm like, God dang it. Like, how come I can't have my shit together? Like, why am I so damaged? Sorry.
I'm trying to get my stuff together too, Rob, looking for how, I was doing healthcare administration before becoming a full-time humanitarian.
Right.
Making pretty good money. And, the calling came and I was like, okay, well, I got to do this work. And so it's been about a year and some change figuring this thing out, this space of humanitarianism. It's not easy most of the time, but I'm having faith that, you had talked about, a lot of the ladies out here, they want the car or the nice house or whatnot. And I'm 34. I'm single right now. I am looking for a wife. And it's been interesting dating and seeing which ladies are like, oh, what do you do for work? And I'm like, oh, I'm a humanitarian. And they're like, they don't at first, like, not knowing what it is and being like, let me look that up and figuring out what that looks like. And then to see the women that gravitate towards it, the women who are repelled from it. And I think that it's all purposeful, right? If I was doing the healthcare administration job, which wasn't really me, right? Wasn't
Right.
wasn't really the calling that God had for me. And I attract someone just because it makes a lot of money versus service of others, as you talked about, the purpose of serving others. It's people I probably wouldn't want to surround myself with in general, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so true what you said. You talk about the healthcare thing and you're like, yeah, it wasn't really me. We all know. I don't mean we all know what you're
Yeah.
saying. We all know when something isn't right for us. We all know when we're turning a blind eye to a relationship or an experience because we think we want what that person or experience will give us. And then, of course, we discover after we walk through it that, oh, that was never for us. And there was a reason that feeling was inside of us, that we knew we were not aligned in some fashion. That's the gift we actually all have. We all have that voice, but are we paying attention to it? And, I talk about it every show too, is this ability to discern. Every listener, follower, whatever you want to call the people that watch this show or listen to the show, you all have the ability to discern. What are you choosing to do with it? Because if you're turning a blind ear to the sound of that voice, that inner voice telling you, Bill, this isn't for you. Karen, this is not for you. Then you're going to walk through tragedy, small or large. You're going to walk through that. And maybe you need to walk through that. Maybe that experience, like my experience over the last 10 years, was required so I could stand here firmly and say, failed, broken human, mistake maker, seeker of wealth and influence, sad guy, failed drummer, all these things that I thought I deserved so I could actually just be here at this moment talking to Kwabi because he's my new friend. And my new friend matters because he's the one right in front of me. So he's the one I have to give attention to. That it can't be about what can I get out of this interview? What can I build my listenership because Kwabi's an influencer? You see what I'm saying? You can't be like that.
Yeah.
And it's really hard because I'm ambitious, man. I want the world. I don't want it now because I feel time. I'm 57 years old. I feel, look, I got all the time in the world. I get it. But I feel like I'm dying. You know what I mean? Like I feel like it's past me. It's way past me. And that's not true.
Not at all. Not at all. I love the aspect of being present. Never in the history of humankind has one person been upset at another for listening to them. Ever.
So true.
When you listen to someone, you're validating their experience, you're humanizing them, and you're respecting them. Imagine, someone getting upset at you. If you just kind of sit there and listen to them, eventually they'll calm down eventually. There's just something strange about the humankind in that way. And I think that through these conversations you're having with hundreds of people, talking to musicians, talking to people about what they do and what they do best, only good can come from that. Only good can come from that. And that's what the beauty of what you do, Rob. It's an amazing thing.
Oh, wow. It's overwhelmingly kind, but that's not false humility. I mean, I mean that. I'm on a daily basis, Kwabi, I'm pretty scared. I admit it. I wish I understood, I mean, maybe you experience this. I don't know. Do you experience this feeling of, it's all going to be fine? Because I don't. I never have. Even when I was rehearsing 10 hours a day and I was in a band with a development deal. I mean, you know what I mean? I've never felt like I was always waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never expected good to come from it. Always expected to fail. For real. Expected to fail. And guess what? I did. So maybe I should reset my sights, eh?
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, I think you've already reset it. What you were talking about, as far as giving without expecting anything in return, seeing that success and progress and positivity is embedded in serving others, that's it. It's a wrap. It's a wrap. That's it. You know, um, I've always been big on trying to figure out solutions, and
Yeah.
I feel like that's been sort of the domino effect or the snowball effect. It's like, okay, we have all these issues, but what are we going to do to work to solve them?
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of been the gravitating force towards building my platform, or being able to help more people. And that's another thing too. It's like, okay, so once we gain traction, okay, so I've won several different awards, and
Yeah.
every time when I receive it, I'm like, cool, because when I get on that podium, it's gonna be talking about some real stuff. Like, forget
Right.
what I got. Like, that's
Right.
cool. Okay, now let's talk about poverty now. Now you got me
Right.
up here. Shouldn't have gave me the award, because now we're gonna talk about the real stuff. You know?
Right. Now you're gonna have your world changed. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right, man. And that's what it's about. Using a platform for the voiceless, people who would who if they had the chance to speak up, they would tell their story that's being snuffed and not heard. Raising your voice for the voiceless and helping those who are less fortunate. That's what see, you're gonna get me emotional, man. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. I'm telling you, man, I am so glad. I'm so glad you're here. I know I've got a few more minutes with you, but I wanna make sure we really touch on what the peace bus is, because I don't
Mhm.
think we've actually defined that for the listening audience. And because this show is so wildly different from anything I normally do, it's like there's got to be a payoff for why they're listening to you and I talk today. So tell the listeners about the Peace Bus. Why does it matter, and why is your heart so on fire for it?
Yeah, so the Peace Bus started out as a platform in order to raise awareness on peace. So back in 2019, I had gotten back from Europe. I had traveled throughout Europe talking to people about peace. I had my posters and I was just walking around talking to people. And when I came back to the US, um, I wanted to create a vehicle for peace. So in 2000, I would say 2017, 18, I was taking flight lessons in grad school because I wanted to have a peace plane, but I had no money, Rob, because I was in grad school. So I was like,
Ah,
I can't get a plane yet. So I stopped that whole endeavor, and I thought, well, if I can't get a peace plane now, I can at least get a peace vehicle. And so I started doing research in the Tacoma community, thinking about, I wanted a Volkswagen van at first,
right.
and I came across this Mitsubishi 1988 van. This
So
guy,
rad.
yeah, it's amazing, man. This guy named Jason in Vashon Island, he had it on the island for years. It hadn't left the island for, I believe, a decade. And
Wow.
so I told him I wanted to create a vehicle for peace. Rob is, it was just amazing. It was just amazing. And so he sold it to me for cheap, and I painted it blue, put the Peace
Yeah.
Bus on the side, and that was when the Peace Bus was launched. I never thought it would turn into a humanitarian aid vehicle. I just thought I'd drive it around town. People would see it and they'd say, oh, they'd start thinking more peaceful thoughts. It would, brighten their day. And I remember the first day I got it painted, I drove to Safeway to get some food. And as
Mhm.
I pull into the parking lot, I see a mom and her daughter who's like 5 years old, and they're walking towards the parking lot. And the daughter's just super happy. She sees the van and she's like, Mom, look at the van. Look, it looks cool. And she's like,
Yeah.
what does that say? Because she couldn't read. And her mom was like, oh, that says the Peace Bus.
Wow.
And the daughter's like, what is peace? And her
Oh
mom's
my
like, we'll
gosh.
talk about it when we get home. And the concept that my van could be the first time that a little girl's learning about what peace means was enough, right?
Yeah.
And then in the Peace Bus, right, there's a space where there's supposed to be seats, but it's an older vehicle, so I think at some point the seats got gutted out. And so there's this open space. So that's when I had the idea of doing local humanitarian aid, using that space to deliver goods to the community. We think of humanitarian aid, we think of helping people in Southeast Asia or Africa or third world countries, which that is
Right.
humanitarian aid. But people need help right here in the United States.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes,
I started
absolutely.
doing yeah, and so I started doing sock drives. That was like my first humanitarian campaign. And here's a cool story with that, Rob. So, the first campaign I did was a sock drive. No one knew about me then. I had this bust, looked cool, but no one knew about me. So I announced on social media, I announced that I wanted to create a sock drive. And so I got
A
about
what? A what
400
drive? A what drive? I'm sorry. A what drive?
sock drive.
Oh, sock. Okay.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
clothing. Okay.
Uh-huh. So I went to Costco and I got the nice thick Kirkland socks, the ones that are really durable and nice
Yep.
and thick.
Yep.
And went around Tacoma giving out socks, right? A year later, I'm at one of the shelters here in downtown Tacoma, and I'm giving out some food. And I see a man, and he comes out of the shelter, and he's dirty, head to toe, like he had been rolling in mud or something. I don't know
Wow.
what he had been doing, but he's just dirty. And he comes over towards me, and he sits down. And I'm talking to another guy, but I stopped talking to him because this guy, I don't know what he's doing. He's sitting down near me. And as he sits down, his pant legs rise up, and he has the whitest socks. And I'm like, bro, you got some nice socks. And he's like, yeah, a year ago you came with that blue van and you gave them to me.
What?
And he's like, yeah. And he's like, these are the best socks I ever had. And I'm
Wow.
like, first of all, I forgot about the man. I forgot about even going to that shelter. This guy remembered me. His whole body was dirty, but his socks were clean. And I imagine, it wasn't about the socks. It was the fact that at that point when I connected with him, he felt humanized, right? He felt like a
Yeah.
human being. And that from that moment forth, I decided to dedicate my life to humanitarianism and helping people. At this point, I've done many campaigns with the Peace Bus. At this point, the Peace Bus is kind of like a prop. I don't really use it so much for humanitarian work, but it's around. I have it. Now
Yeah.
it's just about doing humanitarian work overseas. I went to Africa last year, helping to supply food and resources to orphans. And then I do a campaign this summer called All Youth Can Eat, teaming up with local restaurants in Tacoma and Seattle and ensuring that kids have food to eat. So on every single day of the week, there's a restaurant where youth can eat for free and college students can eat for free.
Wow. It just goes to show you that we can really change not just our world, not our local world or our tiny, in a sense, our familial impact, our neighborhood impact. We really can actually act on a global scale should we choose to put in the work.
Yeah.
And yet it's hard. And in your case, as an example, I know you've received the accolades and you're obviously doing great work and it continues to grow and it's only going to grow bigger. It's going to go bigger and bigger and bigger. And I know that moment you die and you're standing in front of the Lord and he's going to say, well done, faithful servant. I mean, those are for sure. We know these things. But how do we get more people to believe that this is possible to do? It just seems, dude, I'm talking to you and it seems impossible to me and terrifying to give up everything I'm comfortable with, a home, a financial security, everything to serve others. That's not just a mindset, that's a life set.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know how you do it, man.
the cool thing about it is you don't have to. You don't have to give up everything. One of my biggest influences is Muhammad Ali. And Muhammad Ali, as we all know, was one of the greatest boxers of all time, right?
Absolutely.
And he used his platform to help people, right? He was a very wealthy man. He could have just taken all his wealth and just been like, okay, forget everyone. I'm just going to live happily and sort of not bother with helping people. But he made a conscious decision in order to use his platform to help people. He would give out money. There was a story where he talked someone down from jumping out of a window. Like there's many stories about Muhammad Ali helping people. Dude was a boxer. He was a boxer, you know?
Yeah. Just it really is just undoing what culture tells us, isn't it? It is following your heart. It is hearing that voice, that calling inside of you saying, this purpose is for you. This direction here is for you. It's not necessarily saying, oh, I heard Kwabi on a podcast, so I'm going to go do my own version of the Peace Bus. It's saying do your you, whatever your you is, but find a way to serve others through the gift you've been given, right?
1000%, Rob. So everyone has a skill, everyone has a talent. If you don't have one, then you're dead, right? Everyone has something.
Right
Everyone
on.
has something.
So
So
true.
that being the case, all right, cool. That's great you have that. But if you're not utilizing that to help people, and I would even go as far as to say help people that are in need, I don't see the reason behind it. I really don't. I don't see how we have many athletes and musicians that have a craft and they don't make one song at least, or
Mhm.
conducting one benefit to help other people. I think that's the obligation. I would say if we're looking at the past, we can see that many artists and many musicians use their platform to do that. And I think
Mhm.
we've gotten away from that in modern culture. I don't know why that
I can
is,
tell you
but
I can tell you why. I can tell you why.
oh,
And I actually know why because I've talked to artists about this. Sorry for interrupting you, but I do want to say it is that
mhm,
um, artists with the platform are constantly ridiculed for putting their politics out there. Somebody like Bono, for example, with U2, right? He has been responsible over the last 40 years for, like Princess Diana was a mind clearing, right? She had dedicated a tremendous amount of royal assets to helping people in war torn nations go through and remove mines from those nations. Uganda, I don't know, name another one. Liberia, right? She was helping that, and Bono actually got involved, and then of course Princess Diana died in 1997. He continued some of her things forward, but he's continued expanding his reach by being basically a global giver. And he receives tons and tons and tons and tons of hate mail because of it. So I'm not
mhm.
saying this is the standard across all humans, but I am saying that when people are in the public eye, the first thing they're told is to shut up. We don't want to hear your perspective. And yet, I'm not sure why that happens outside of some demonic thing, this entity idea of like, we want to usurp that power. We want to cut off what is good. But to me, you have to develop some form of thick skin. And I think social media reminds you constantly that there's a group of people that hate you and they're active and they're loud and they'll tell you about it all day. If you post online, Kwabi, that you're doing all these good things, there's going to be people that poo-poo you left and right, and they're going to be loud. So
Like,
I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying I think that's a common experience, and people they don't want to feel uncomfortable for doing good. I just think that's kind of the problem.
yeah, you should see my hate mail, Rob. It's yeah,
But
man.
you're but see, I'm proving my point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're proving my point. Excuse me.
Yeah. No, for sure, for sure. You talked about the thickness of the skin. I think that that's along with it as well. I think that being rooted in your mission, the reason why, and being thankful and grateful from the creator of you being even in this space will
Right.
humble people to realizing how they can help other people. And you're right. I can see that now. While why a musician may not want to get in those spaces, knowing the backlash and how that could probably affect them financially too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's
yeah,
not like an abortion thing, like I mean, look, I mean, artists have all sorts of causes, and some of them are causes I don't necessarily agree with. But no matter what, they're going to get the mail. No matter what, they're going to be hated for doing something that they believe in because there's a half of the world disagrees with that perspective.
yeah. Okay,
And yeah,
but check this out. Okay, so right now we're very polarized politically in our society,
right.
namely the United States. Right? I mean,
Hmm.
the regular left seems far left. The regular right seems far right.
Right.
And I wrote a letter to the president, and this is 2021. I actually did this campaign called Manifest Humanity. I took the Peace Bus and drove all the way to Washington, D.C., giving out hundreds of books to college students and youth, right? Books
Rad,
about
rad.
love
That's
and
so
peace
cool.
and empowerment, these things. And when I wrote the letter to the president, it was a plea, it was an ask to address the major issues that are preventing us from creating a more peaceful society that I believe that everyone can agree on, right? That we need to dismantle. Though how we go about dismantling them is up for debate. And I would say that unless you're insane, there's no one out here that's saying poverty is a good thing, unless you're insane, right?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so we have that. We have that one, right? I would say that unless, yeah, unless you're insane, I would say we have an overall consensus that things like racism is a bad thing.
Right.
You can't outwardly say that publicly now. I mean, maybe behind closed doors, but outwardly you can't be like, yeah, this racism's good, right?
Right.
And then the last one is quality education. No matter if you're a Democrat, a Republican, liberal, or conservative, no one's out here being like, our kids, we want them to be less educated. We want our kids to be as educated as possible. So, that being the case, what if we could transcend our modern society to gravitating towards the three things that we all can agree are negative things and work together to dismantle them, and we don't have to be as polarized. And if you watch the media, they never talk about those things. They
Right.
never. A candidate has never made that well, that's been in the limelight, an essential part of their candidacy of what they want to go about dismantling. And so I wrote a letter to the president. I don't know if he got it. Probably didn't. Who knows? But as far as I'm concerned, I think that that could be sort of like our nemesis, our main nemesis together. We could tackle.
Right. Well, I mean, but at least you wrote the letter, right? I mean, I look at it and say, look, I think the reality of having a mission of any kind, whether it's your mission, my mission, whatever you even want to call a mission, is the willingness to stand up for what you believe in regardless. And Miles Monroe, I probably talk about this once a month, so my listeners are going to roll their eyes again. But do you know who Miles Monroe was?
No.
Okay, so you should check him out after we're done here. He was I want to say Jamaican, but he might have been from Trinidad. That being said, he was from the Caribbean, and he was a what's the term? Not positive speaker, but he was a public speaker and a pastor, and of course he got a lot of flack for that because he wove his public persona into his pulpit stories, and a lot of people don't like that. To them, it feels like mega church thinking, right? This sort of false Christianity, whatever you want to call it, positive thinking versus actual grace or trust in Christ. All this being said, he was an amazing public speaker. There's a ton of recorded documents from him, a lot of stuff on YouTube, and I highly encourage people to check it out. Miles Monroe, Munroe. And he said a million great things, but he said something that I thought was really fascinating that I love to remind people. He said, when you believe in something, if you truly believe in something, you have to say it out loud because the enemy can't read your mind. He can only hear your voice. And then once you've said it out loud, that enemy's going to come and he's going to battle you and he's going to cause all sorts of chaos. And you're going to have to deal with that. The beauty is there will be a moment when you've overcome the enemy. And the people who need to hear your voice, and to hear your words, and everybody else on top of that will believe you because you withstood the battle. And I'm like, wow. Like, so you're telling me I am, Rob, and I'm a, whatever you want to call it, voiceover guy, podcaster, and the enemy's going to come calling? And the answer is yes, because he's afraid of my voice. He's afraid of your voice. But if we battle through, we will overcome because we have something he'll never have, which is the grace and support of our Creator. And we can be gigantic weapons if we withstand. So you asked me originally, what's the thing that I learned from the military? It's the ability to withstand. It's the ability to overcome. And with God's grace, I've been able to do that. And here we are sitting here talking about hope in the future and the impact in the lives of others. And neither of us probably deserve to be here, but we're here anyway.
Yeah.
I know that was
Another-
tangential, but I wanted to throw it out there.
Oh, that was a mic drop. Another mic drop, Rob.
Oh, so last thing, how can we serve the Peace Bus? How can we serve Kwabi?
Oh yeah, man. The best thing, and I love this the absolute most, is messaging. Message me on Instagram. Let's have a little conversation about peace. I'm always asking anyone and everyone of what peace means to them. Everyone should be constantly learning. You're never done learning. If someone says they're done learning, they're lying or they're completely arrogant. So I love hearing people's perspectives on peace. Yeah, and then helping whatever the current humanitarian campaign that I'm doing. So right now I'm doing All Youth Can Eat. You can find information about All Youth Can Eat on my website, thepeacebus.org. And yeah, that'd be the best way. So peacebus.org. Also following me on Instagram at the Peace Bus.
Awesome, man. I love you, brother. I do.
Love you too, man.
You are a special person that I feel honored and blessed to know, and I couldn't have asked for a better guest today. And I want to continue to support your mission, and I believe in everything you're saying, and I want you to know that. So thanks for being here, brother.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Sentimental Illness with Rob Leland. Our theme song, Machine, has been graciously provided by Harris Heller. Don't forget to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast media. You can directly support the show on Patreon as well, where you can find us at patreon.com/This is Sentimental Illness. It also helps us a lot if you rate the show online. So jump out there and give us 5 stars. And lastly, always remember, your mind will overthink everything, but your heart can never love enough. See you soon.